Maid's daughter recognized a familiar signature. The billionaire went pale. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's jump into the story. It was a quiet evening at the lavish mansion of the renowned billionaire, Charles Henderson. The grand estate, tucked away in the heart of Silicon Valley, exuded wealth and exclusivity. As guests mingled in the ballroom, surrounded by opulent crystal chandeliers and the faint scent of expensive perfume, the atmosphere was one of power and sophistication. But in the far corner of the room, a young girl, not more than 10 years old, sat quietly. Her name was Emma, the maid's daughter, and she had learned from an early age to remain unnoticed. She was small, with wide eyes that seemed to absorb everything around her. Today, she had been given the impossible task of attending the event, simply because her mother, the housekeeper, had no one else to watch over her. Emma sat at the edge of the room, her back pressed against the cool marble wall. She clutched her book tightly in her lap, trying to keep her head down and blend into the background. But despite her best efforts, her keen eyes couldn't help but notice the constant stream of guests. Among them, the most distinguished of all was Charles Henderson himself, the man who had built an empire from nothing. His presence dominated the room, and every conversation seemed to pause when he walked by. The billionaire had always been a figure of admiration, his wealth and success a beacon for those striving to achieve the impossible. But today, Emma's attention wasn't on the man himself. It was on the documents he was signing. A sharp, almost imperceptible glance was all it took for Emma to spot something unusual. She recognized the signature. It was a name she had seen before, though it wasn't in the context she was familiar with. Her mother had once spoken about a transaction involving the Henderson estate, one that had been a matter of much secrecy. Emma couldn't quite place it, but something about the signature seemed out of place. As the billionaire signed another paper, Emma's heart began to race. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. She had no idea what it meant, but the signature haunted her thoughts. Was it just her imagination, or had she stumbled upon something far bigger than herself? The room, filled with laughter and chatter, suddenly felt distant. She stood up quietly, walking to the front of the room, where Charles Henderson was still engaged in conversation with his guests. The closer she got, the clearer it became. The signature on the paper was no mistake. She recognized it. Emma's mother had once mentioned that signature in passing, tied to a scandal that had been buried in the past. Was this the key to uncovering it? Emma's heart raced as she continued to watch Charles Henderson sign the papers. Her mind raced with questions. Why had her mother mentioned this name? Why did the signature feel so familiar? She was just a little girl. How could she have possibly stumbled upon something so important? But she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. She had been taught to observe the world around her quietly, to stay unnoticed, but now her instincts were pushing her forward. With each stroke of Henderson's pen, a sense of dread grew in her chest. It wasn't just a name on a piece of paper. There was something bigger behind it, something hidden. Emma's fingers tightened around her book, her only shield in a room full of strangers. She took a deep breath and approached the desk where the billionaire was seated, surrounded by his associates. The faint murmur of conversation filled the air, but Emma's focus was singular. She had to be sure. As she got closer, she could hear bits of the conversation, but they felt distant, like the words were being spoken in another world. Her eyes locked onto the papers in front of him again, and there it was, his signature, matching exactly what she had seen earlier. It wasn't just any signature. It was the same one her mother had spoken about in hushed tones. The signature had once been tied to a shady deal, a business transaction that had gone wrong. Emma didn't fully understand it then, but now it was all coming together in a way that made her uneasy. She glanced up at Henderson, who was still engrossed in conversation. His face was a picture of confidence and authority, but Emma noticed the subtle way he shifted in his seat, almost as if he was trying to avoid the truth coming to light. Her small hand shook slightly as she reached for the edge of the desk. Her breath was shallow, but her mind was clear. She had to act now. Emma gathered all her courage and spoke in a soft, but steady voice. "Excuse me, sir." The billionaire paused, his eyes lifting from the documents. For a split second, their gazes met. Emma's heart skipped a beat as she noticed the flicker of something behind his eyes. Was it recognition, or just surprise that someone so insignificant had dared to speak to him? His lips curled into a polite smile, but Emma could sense the tension in the air. "Yes, young lady." His tone was cordial, but there was an edge to it, as if he was unsure of what to expect from this unexpected interruption. I think you're making a mistake." Emma's words were barely audible, but they seemed to hang in the air like a heavy fog. Henderson raised an eyebrow. "A mistake?" he asked, his voice growing more curious, but still with that distant authority. "Yes," Emma said, swallowing hard. "The signature. I've seen it before. It's not what you think." The billionaire froze, his eyes narrowing slightly. His face, which had been so confident just moments ago, now seemed to stiffen. He looked down at the papers again, then back at Emma, his expression unreadable. "What do you mean, young lady?" he asked, his voice quieter now. "What do you know about that signature?" Emma took a deep breath, trying to steady her shaking hands. "It's the same one that's on the contract my mother told me about. The one she said was linked to something wrong. I don't understand it all, but I think it's connected to something bad." Henderson's eyes flickered with something that could have been fear, but it was gone so quickly that Emma wondered if she had imagined it. The room seemed to freeze in that moment, as if everyone in it was waiting for his reaction. Emma's small voice had shattered the calm facade, and she could feel the weight of everyone's gaze turning toward her. The billionaire's hand hovered over the papers, his fingers twitching, but he said nothing. Emma's words had planted a seed of doubt, and she knew it. Something was happening, something that would change everything, and she had no idea how far it would go. The room seemed to hold its breath as Emma's words hung in the air. Everyone was staring at her now, and for the first time in her life, she didn't feel invisible. Henderson was silent, his gaze locked on her with an intensity that made her heart race. She could feel the weight of his stare, as if he were trying to figure out whether to dismiss her or listen. For a moment, it felt like time had stopped. The billionaire's hand slowly withdrew from the papers on the desk, and he leaned back in his chair. His eyes narrowed, and Emma could see the wheels turning in his mind. She had no idea what was going to happen next, but she knew one thing for sure. Things were about to change. Henderson's voice finally broke the silence, low and measured. "You think this signature is part of something wrong?" he asked, his tone more serious than before. Emma nodded, her throat tight. "I don't know all the details," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "But my mother spoke about it. She said it was tied to a deal that wasn't right. I don't understand everything, but I know it's connected to something that shouldn't be happening." Henderson stared at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Emma could feel the room's tension building as his mind processed her words. He looked down at the papers again, his fingers brushing over the signature as if to reassure himself that it was real. The silence stretched on, but Emma didn't look away. She stood her ground, her heart pounding in her chest. "This is the beginning of something bigger, isn't it?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Henderson didn't respond immediately. Instead, he glanced around the room, meeting the eyes of his associates, who had been watching this exchange with growing curiosity. Emma's words had broken the calm, and now everyone seemed to be waiting for the next move. Finally, Henderson spoke again, his voice cold but tinged with something else, something Emma couldn't quite place. "You've been listening to your mother too much," he said, his words sharp, but there was no anger in his tone, just an eerie calm. Emma didn't flinch. "I'm just telling the truth." The billionaire studied her for a long moment before slowly rising from his chair. He walked around the desk, his footsteps echoing through the silent room. Emma stood her ground, but her mind was racing. Was he angry? Was he going to dismiss her like everyone else always did? Henderson stopped in front of her, towering over the small girl. "You've stirred up a lot of questions, young lady," he said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. "But you're not wrong. There's more to this story than you know." Emma's heart skipped a beat. Did he just admit it? Did he just confirm that there was something wrong? She could barely believe her ears. Henderson continued, his eyes narrowing. "You want to know the truth, don't you?" he asked, his voice now cold and calculating. Emma nodded. She wasn't afraid anymore. She wasn't going to back down. "Then you'll have to dig deeper," Henderson said. "But be warned, Emma, this is a dangerous game. You might not like what you find. His words sent a chill down her spine, but Emma didn't waver. She had come this far, and there was no turning back now. As Henderson turned to leave, Emma's mind raced. What was he going to do? Would he try to stop her from uncovering the truth? She had no idea, but one thing was certain. The mystery was just beginning. Henderson's parting words echoed in her mind. You've opened a door, but once it's open, you can't close it. And with that, he walked away, leaving Emma standing there, her heart pounding in her chest, knowing that the world around her was about to change forever. Emma stood frozen in the middle of the room, her heart racing, her mind swirling with questions. Henderson's words lingered in the air, thick with uncertainty. You've opened a door, but once it's open, you can't close it. The billionaire had walked away, leaving her standing alone with 1,000 thoughts bombarding her. What had he meant by that? What was she about to uncover? Emma's small fingers gripped the edges of her book, her only anchor in a world suddenly full of shadows and secrets. She had always been an observer, someone who stood in the background and kept quiet. But now, for the first time, she felt a burning need to act. Her mother's warnings about Henderson's dealings had always been vague, just whispers of things that were better left unsaid. But Emma had heard enough to know that whatever was hidden in those papers, it was more than just a business deal gone wrong. As the night wore on, the mansion's lavish ballroom began to empty, the laughter and chatter of the guests fading into the background. Emma lingered in the corner, her eyes scanning the room. The other servants were busy cleaning up, their faces blank as they worked, as if they were all too used to being invisible. But Emma couldn't shake the feeling that she was part of something bigger now. She had a choice to make. She could ignore what she had seen, go back to being the quiet, unnoticed maid's daughter, and pretend that nothing had happened. Or she could dig deeper, face the dangers ahead, and uncover the truth. She knew what her mother would say. Stay quiet, stay out of trouble. But Emma wasn't sure she could do that anymore. The truth was calling to her, pulling her in, and for the first time in her life, she wanted to know what lay beyond the surface. That night, as Emma lay in bed, her thoughts wouldn't let her sleep. She could see the signature in her mind's eye, and the image of Henderson's face as he hesitated before walking away. He hadn't denied her words. In fact, he had seemed almost intrigued. Emma's heart pounded in her chest as she made a decision. She had to learn more. The next morning, she slipped away from the mansion before her mother could stop her. She walked through the quiet streets, her mind focused on one goal: to uncover the truth about Henderson, the signature, and the secret he was so desperate to protect. Emma knew she couldn't do it alone. She needed help, someone who could guide her through the maze of lies and deceit that surrounded the billionaire. Her first stop was the old library in town. She had always loved books, and it was the one place where she felt safe, where she could lose herself in a world of stories. But today, she was searching for something much more important than a good read. She was searching for answers. As she walked through the aisles of dusty bookshelves, Emma's eyes fell on a worn, leather-bound volume that looked out of place among the modern texts. She pulled it down carefully, brushing off the dust. It was a history of the Henderson family, a book she had never seen before. She flipped through the pages, her eyes scanning quickly, until she found the section on Charles Henderson's rise to power. It was there, in black and white, that she saw it, the name that matched the signature from the night before. A name tied to a shady business deal that had been buried long ago. Emma's heart skipped a beat. This was it. The door was opening, and she was about to step through it. But she had no idea where it would lead. She closed the book and tucked it under her arm. There was no turning back now. She was in this, for better or worse. The search for the truth had just begun, and Emma was ready to face whatever came next. Emma couldn't believe what she had found. The book she had tucked under her arm held the answers she had been looking for, but it was only the beginning. As she walked back through the quiet streets, the weight of the leather-bound book felt heavier than ever. The Henderson family's dark past was now in her hands, but she couldn't shake the feeling that someone, somewhere, was watching her. Her thoughts were interrupted as she rounded the corner toward her mother's apartment. She had to make a plan. She had to act carefully, and she knew it. Emma slipped inside the apartment, trying to make herself as quiet as possible. Her mother was busy in the kitchen, unaware of what Emma had uncovered. The faint smell of soup simmering filled the air, a comfort Emma hadn't realized she missed. She sat down at the small dining table, her eyes scanning the book's pages again. There it was. A business deal gone wrong, a signature tied to a fraudulent investment, a scandal buried beneath layers of wealth and lies. The name attached to the signature, a man who had been part of Henderson's rise to power, had disappeared under suspicious circumstances. Emma could feel the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. This was no coincidence. The deal was tied to the very foundation of Henderson's empire. Her mother had always spoken in hushed tones about the dangers of getting involved in things that didn't concern them, but Emma couldn't ignore the truth. She had to know more. As the day wore on, Emma found herself distracted, her mind racing with questions. She couldn't tell her mother everything, not yet. But she had to be careful. If someone in the Henderson family had gone to such lengths to bury the truth, who else might be involved? The thought was chilling. She couldn't help but feel like she was walking a tightrope, each step drawing her closer to something she wasn't fully prepared for. That night, after her mother had gone to bed, Emma sat up late, reading through the book, looking for any hint that could point her in the right direction. It was then she found a mention of an old family friend, someone whose name had been linked to several of the shady business dealings. The man had been a close associate of Henderson's for years, but had vanished shortly after the questionable deals were made. Emma felt a surge of determination. This man could hold the key to everything. But where was he now? The more she read, the more questions emerged, and she realized just how deep this web of secrets went. But Emma couldn't stop. She had already opened the door, and there was no turning back. The next day, Emma decided to visit the local archives. The library had records dating back decades, and she was sure that with some time, she could uncover more about the missing associate. She didn't tell her mother where she was going. She couldn't risk anyone knowing what she was about to do. At the library, Emma combed through old files, looking for anything that mentioned the missing man. She spent hours poring over dusty folders and yellowed papers. It was almost closing time when she found it. A faded newspaper article detailing the sudden disappearance of the man and the rumors surrounding his involvement with the Henderson family. The article mentioned a brief mention of a financial dispute that had led to his fall from grace. But there was something else. The man had been last seen near a small town on the outskirts of the city. Emma's heart skipped a beat. That was it. The next clue, the next step in unraveling the mystery. She knew what she had to do, but she also knew it would be dangerous. Someone, somewhere, was going to stop her. Emma wasn't afraid. She had come this far, and now, she was closer than ever to uncovering the truth. Emma had made up her mind. The newspaper article she had found in the library was the final piece of the puzzle, and now, she had to follow the trail. The town mentioned in the article was just a few hours away, a place she had never been before, tucked on the outskirts of the city. It wasn't a bustling metropolis or even a small suburb. It was a quiet, forgotten corner of the world, where people lived their lives without much regard for the noise of the city. But to Emma, this was where the answers lay. The more she thought about it, the more she realized how much danger she was in. If the Henderson family had gone to such lengths to hide the truth, what would they do if they realized she was getting closer? But Emma wasn't afraid. She couldn't afford to be. She had already come too far to turn back now. The next morning, she packed a small bag, grabbed the book she had been reading, and slipped out of the apartment before her mother could notice. She couldn't risk anyone knowing where she was going or what she was about to do. The drive to the small town was long and quiet. Emma couldn't stop her mind from racing with thoughts about what she would find when she got there. Would the missing man still be alive? Would he have answers? She didn't know, but she had to try. As she reached the town, Emma was struck by how different it was from the city. The streets were narrow and quiet, the buildings old but well kept, and the people seemed to go about their business without paying much attention to outsiders. She found a small motel on the edge of town, rented a room, and began to ask around. At first, no one seemed to know anything about the man she was looking for, but she kept pushing, asking the right questions. Finally, an elderly woman working at a local diner mentioned his name. "You're looking for Thomas Walsh, right?" the woman asked, her voice slow and deliberate. "I remember him. Used to be in business with some big names. But that was years ago." Emma nodded, her heart racing. "Do you know where I can find him?" The woman hesitated for a moment, then pointed to a house on the edge of town. "He lives out there. It's been a long time since anyone's seen him, but that's where he used to stay." Emma thanked her and quickly left the diner, her mind focused on the house. It was only a few miles away, but the walk felt longer than it should have. Every step she took made her feel like she was getting closer to something dangerous, something she might not be ready to face. When she arrived at the house, she hesitated at the gate. It was old, the paint chipped and faded. The yard was overgrown, and the windows were dark. Emma felt a chill run down her spine. This was it. She had found him. She took a deep breath and walked up to the door, knocking softly. The sound echoed in the quiet air. For a moment, there was no answer. Then, the door creaked open, revealing a man who looked much older than she had imagined. His face was lined with years of hard living, and his eyes were weary, but when he saw Emma standing there, something in his expression changed. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice rough. "My name is Emma," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I need your help. I know about the Henderson deal. I know what happened." Thomas Walsh looked at her for a long moment, his eyes narrowing, as if sizing her up. "You shouldn't be here," he said quietly, stepping aside to let her in. "But you're in this now, whether you like it or not." Emma stepped inside, and as she crossed the threshold, she knew that everything was about to change. The truth was no longer a distant idea. It was right in front of her, and she was about to uncover it, no matter what the cost. Thomas Walsh shut the door softly behind Emma, his eyes scanning the room to make sure no one had seen her enter. The house was old and worn, with the faint smell of dust and mildew lingering in the air. The walls were lined with shelves of forgotten books and trinkets, remnants of a lifelong past. Emma felt a chill in her spine as she stood in the dimly lit living room, her heart pounding with anticipation. This man held the answers she had been seeking, but something in the atmosphere made her uneasy. Walsh motioned for her to sit down at a small, cluttered table in the corner of the room. He sank into a worn chair across from her, his eyes never leaving hers. "You know about Henderson, huh?" he asked, his voice raspy. Emma nodded, swallowing hard. "I know he was involved in something bad. I found a signature, and it led me here. My mother told me about it years ago, but I didn't understand. Now I do." Walsh's face darkened as she spoke, and he leaned back in his chair. "Your mother was right to be cautious," he said slowly, his tone grave. "The Henderson family has a lot of skeletons in their closet, but this one is dangerous. You don't know what you're getting into." Emma didn't flinch. "I have to know. I can't stop now." He studied her for a moment, as if measuring her resolve, then sighed deeply. "Fine. But understand this, Emma. There's a lot more at stake here than you realize. The signature you saw, the one that Henderson signed, it's part of a deal that went south. A deal that led to the disappearance of some very important people, including me." Emma's eyes widened. "You disappeared?" Walsh nodded grimly. "For years, they thought I was dead. But the truth is, I've been hiding. Hiding from them. Hiding from Henderson." Emma leaned forward, her mind racing. "What happened? What deal was it?" Walsh hesitated for a moment, as if weighing whether to tell her the full truth. Finally, he spoke. "It was a land deal. A big one. Henderson was involved in a property transaction that could have made him billions, but it was built on lies. When the truth started to come out, people started to disappear. I was one of them." Emma sat in silence, absorbing his words. "But why? Why would they go so far?" Walsh's eyes hardened. "Because money and power are everything to people like Henderson. He'll do anything to protect his empire, even if it means destroying anyone who stands in his way." Emma's chest tightened. "So what now? What do I do with this information?" Walsh stood up and walked over to a cluttered desk, pulling out a folder filled with old documents. He handed it to Emma, his hands shaking slightly. "Take this. It's everything you need to know. The names, the dates, the facts that Henderson tried to bury. If you want to expose him, this is your proof." Emma took the folder, her hands trembling. She had never imagined she would be this close to the truth. The weight of the documents felt heavy in her hands, but she couldn't back down now. She had come this far. "Thank you," she said quietly, though she wasn't sure if she meant it. Walsh looked at her, his eyes softening just a little. "You're braver than I was at your age. Just be careful. They won't stop looking for you. And when they find you, they won't be merciful." Emma nodded, her heart heavy with the knowledge she now carried. She had no choice but to keep moving forward. The truth was out there, and now, with Walsh's help, she had the key to unlocking it. But she also knew that the deeper she went, the more dangerous it would become. Henderson was watching, and she had no idea how far he would go to protect himself. As she left the house, the folder clutched tightly in her hands. Emma knew that she was no longer just the maid's daughter. She was someone with power, with the ability to change everything. And she would not stop until the truth came to light. The weight of the folder in Emma's hands felt heavier than ever as she made her way back to the motel. Her mind was spinning with the information she had just uncovered. She had the proof, the documents that could expose Henderson and unravel the web of lies he had spent years building. But with that knowledge came danger, and Emma could feel the cold weight of it settling into her bones. As she entered her room, she locked the door behind her, pressing the folder against her chest. The night outside was eerily quiet, the kind of silence that made everything feel like it was holding its breath. Emma's heart was racing, but she knew there was no turning back. She had to act, and she had to act quickly. She sat at the small table in the corner, the room dimly lit by the single lamp on the nightstand. Her fingers trembled as she opened the folder. Each piece of paper was a piece of the puzzle, detailing the shady deals, the missing people, and the lies that had been hidden from the public. As she scanned the pages, she felt a growing sense of dread. The truth was right in front of her, but it was much darker than she had imagined. She knew that revealing this information would shake the foundations of Henderson's empire, but she also knew it would make her a target. The billionaire would stop at nothing to protect himself, and she had no idea how far he was willing to go. Emma's thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. Her heart jumped into her throat, and for a moment, she froze. Who could it be? She hadn't told anyone where she was staying, and no one knew she was here. Slowly, she stood up, making her way to the door. She peered through the peephole, her breath catching in her chest. It was a man in a dark suit, someone she didn't recognize. He wasn't alone. Behind him were two other men, all looking just as out of place in this quiet town as she felt. Emma's mind raced. Was this Henderson's doing? Had they found her already? She backed away from the door, clutching the folder tighter in her hands. She had to think fast. Without wasting another second, she grabbed her bag, shoved the folder inside, and hurried to the window. It was a risky move, but there was no other option. She could hear the men's voices through the door, their conversation low but urgent. Emma didn't wait to find out what they wanted. She pushed open the window, her heart pounding as she looked down at the ground. It wasn't a long drop, but it was enough to make her hesitate for just a second. She knew this was her only chance to escape. As she climbed out of the window, she could hear the men outside the door, their voices growing louder. They were coming in. Emma's feet hit the ground, and she ran. She didn't look back. Her mind was focused on one thing, getting to safety. She didn't know where she was going or what she was going to do next, but she knew she couldn't let them catch her. She ran through the quiet streets, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The adrenaline surged through her veins, pushing her forward. She didn't know how far she had run, but she couldn't stop. She couldn't let them get the folder. The truth had to come out, no matter what. As she turned a corner, she stumbled, almost falling to the ground. She caught herself, her heart pounding in her chest. She had to keep moving. Her eyes scanned the darkened street ahead, looking for any sign of help. But the town was silent, too silent. It felt like she was all alone in the world. And then, as if on cue, a car drove past, its headlights illuminating the street. Emma's heart skipped a beat as she saw the familiar car. It was the one she had seen earlier in the day, the same car that had driven her to the library. She ran toward it without thinking. She didn't know who it was, but at that moment, it didn't matter. She needed help, and this was her chance. She waved her arms frantically, trying to get their attention. The car slowed down, and to Emma's relief, it stopped. The door opened, and a voice called out to her. "Get in." It was a man's voice, calm and steady. Without hesitation, Emma ran to the car and jumped in. The door slammed shut behind her, and the car sped off into the night. Emma looked out the window, her heart still racing. She had no idea who this person was or what he wanted, but for the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to breathe. The danger wasn't over, but for now, she was safe. She had made it out, and that was all that mattered. The car sped through the empty streets, the engine humming steadily in the night. Emma sat in the back seat, her hands still clutching the folder, her heart still racing from the escape. The man driving the car didn't say a word. His face was calm, but Emma couldn't shake the feeling that he was hiding something. She kept glancing at him in the rearview mirror, trying to read him, but his eyes were focused on the road ahead. Emma's mind was spinning. She had no idea who this man was or what he wanted, but for the first time in what felt like forever, she felt a strange sense of safety. The danger was still out there, but for now, she was alive, and she had the truth in her hands. "Where are we going?" she finally asked, breaking the silence. The man's gaze flickered to the rearview mirror, meeting her eyes for the first time. "Somewhere safe," he replied, his voice steady. Emma nodded but didn't say anything more. She trusted him. At least, she had to. She didn't have any other choice. The ride seemed to stretch on forever, and Emma's mind kept racing with thoughts about what would happen when they got to wherever they were going. Would they help her expose Henderson? Would they keep her safe from whatever danger was still out there? The car eventually slowed and pulled into a small, secluded cabin on the outskirts of town. The lights were dim, and the area was quiet, surrounded by dense trees. Emma had no idea what to expect, but she followed the man out of the car and toward the cabin. "This is where we can talk," the man said, his tone more relaxed now. "You've got a lot of questions, and I've got answers. But we need to be careful about who we trust." Emma's curiosity piqued, but she kept her guard up. She wasn't about to trust anyone completely, not yet. She had learned that the hard way. Inside the cabin, the atmosphere was simple but welcoming. It felt like a place where people came to lay low, to hide from the world. The man gestured for Emma to sit at a small table in the corner. He placed the folder in front of her, and as he did, Emma could see the faintest trace of a smile on his lips. "You've done well," he said. "You're brave, Emma. Not many people your age would have the courage to keep pushing, to dig into something like this. But you're on the right path." Emma felt a sense of pride swell inside her, but it was quickly overshadowed by the weight of the situation. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The man took a deep breath and sat across from her. "Now, we make sure Henderson doesn't get away with it. We'll need to go public with what you've found. The truth has to come out. But it's not going to be easy. There are powerful people behind all of this, people who will stop at nothing to protect their secrets." Emma nodded, feeling the gravity of his words. She knew the fight wasn't over, but for the first time, she felt like she wasn't alone. She wasn't just a little girl anymore. She was someone with a purpose, with the power to expose the truth. The man leaned forward, his eyes serious. "You're going to need help, Emma. You can't do this alone. But I can help you. I know people who can make this all come to light, but we have to be smart about it. We have to be careful." Emma swallowed hard. She was ready. She had come this far, and now there was no turning back. "I'm ready," she said, her voice steady. "Let's do it." As the man nodded and began to explain the next steps, Emma felt a sense of resolve wash over her. The truth was in her hands, and she wasn't going to let anyone stop her. She had already risked everything to get here, and now, with the help of this stranger, she was going to make sure Henderson's empire crumbled. It wasn't just about the money, or the power, or even the people who had been hurt. It was about doing what was right, and Emma knew, deep down, that she had the strength to see it through. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in her life, Emma felt like she had a chance to make a real difference. And no one, nothing, was going to take that away from her. In this captivating tale of suspense and intrigue, a young girl uncovers dark secrets tied to a billionaire's empire, leading to a dangerous journey of truth-seeking and survival. As the story unfolds, you'll witness how a seemingly ordinary maid's daughter becomes entangled in a web of deception and power, uncovering hidden business dealings that could shake the foundations of wealth and influence. This is not just another one of those typical millionaire stories. It's a deep dive into the lengths people will go to protect their fortunes. With a powerful narrative that blends mystery, danger, and the resilience of a young girl determined to expose the truth, this story explores the untold side of millionaire stories where the price of secrecy can be life itself. As Emma, the maid's daughter, risks everything to uncover the truth, she discovers that even the wealthiest individuals have skeletons they would do anything to keep hidden. In this twist-filled journey, you'll see how a simple signature leads to the unraveling of a multi-million-dollar empire, leaving us to question how far someone will go to protect their riches. This is a story of grit, determination, and uncovering the dark side of the world's wealthiest families, and it's one of those unforgettable millionaire stories that will keep you at the edge of your seat. Will Emma succeed in exposing the truth, or will the powerful forces behind the millionaire's empire stop her before she can finish her mission? Get ready to dive into a thrilling ride through deception, betrayal, and unexpected heroes, making this one of the most gripping millionaire stories you've ever heard.